Welcome to Today in DEI with Dr. B.A. I'm Dennis Tardan. Welcome, Doctor.
Hi, Dennis. So good to see you.
So good to see you. I understand something's been happening at the University of Alabama.
Dennis, I don't even know where to start. Um,
Exactly. That's the way we ought to start every single time. I don't know where to start, but go ahead.
it has been horrendous since the 20th of January when the executive order was signed, basically trying to erase DEI.
Mhm.
And now, and I've watched what's been happening ever since. I've watched schools cave, sort of preemptory before they have even been asked directly. Uh, I've seen them give up programs that I know are helpful programs. And now we've gotten to a phase where what happened there is the second time I've seen that happen, which is that somebody has gone in with a camera undercover and asked questions about what the university was still doing. And the people who are talking to them think it's safe to do so, and they end up saying some version of we still exactly what the way we feel about it. We're still trying to do it, but we're renaming what we're doing because we understand that it works and it has value. And that then gets reported, the people get fired, and the board of directors, the legislatures, the states get involved in it. And, this sort of finger pointing and saying, you shouldn't have done that. We were supposed to be getting rid of this. We put measures in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. So, and one of the things that's so disturbing to me about this is something that I think has been happening in other places in the administration with their policies, which is to make people fearful. If I were a person working in this area, I would not have any idea of who I could talk to, who I couldn't, whether the concern that's being expressed is legitimate concern or whether you're trying to set me up to zap me. And the thing that is of value to me is that there is no way that you can have a multicultural society and grow up homogeneously and get to a workplace, which is always my area of concern, and then be expected to know how to prevent the possibility of violations of law under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 64, because you don't know what's in your head. You don't know, you haven't been trained to figure out this is probably not a good thing under these circumstances.
But Doctor, all right, let me ask a question though, as a lawyer in this, but if the Justice Department will not enforce Title VII, will not enforce this, then what is the challenge for a business if it's not going to be enforced?
Well, keep in mind that what the original, your point is absolutely valid, except that it's still the law. Okay.
It's the law, but if you don't enforce the law, if the law says that the speed limit is 45 miles an hour and no police person is going to be there enforcing the law, and somebody's going 75 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, but
Yeah.
never is there anyone to enforce the law, what does the law's on the books,
Yeah.
but what does it mean?
I'm not sure that we're at a point yet where there are no police officers around that are ever going to see you. And that's why I say the law is still there,
I
because
hope so.
the law is
I
still
want to do
there,
that. I'm
is
asking to
still
be.
there. People are still bringing claims, and those claims, I'm not convinced, I haven't seen yet that except for LGBT, well, I won't even say LGBT, T claims, that is for
Right.
transgenders, that those are the only people that they've actually said, basically, these claims come in, we're putting them in the trash can because that's just not anything that we care about. Just today, the Supreme Court issued a decision, and the one thing that made me know I was probably going to be okay with this decision, because it was a unanimous one about the workplace, about Title VII, was that Justice Ketanji Brown wrote the decision, which meant I knew I could trust it because she understands this and doesn't seem to have an agenda that she has brought into that says we will not hold people accountable. So, and the other thing is that you cannot have police officers around, but because, I mean, think about it. When's the last time you came home at 3 o'clock in the morning and stopped at a red light? Probably every time you do it, right? Even though there are no cops around, you know that there's this rule that you're supposed to follow. Sure. I think that and you know that that's true for a lot of reasons other than just being able to not see the police, right? We have had this law now for over 60 years or 60 years, I guess, this year. And people are used to not discriminating, even though cases are still brought. And I think that the other piece of this, sort of the DEI piece, as opposed to the law, because that's not based on law, but the Title VII stuff is law. I think what that ends up doing is letting you know that piece is still there. You should work with it. Even for the DEI, it's phrased as illegal DEI is what will not be tolerated, as opposed to DEI wholesale. Now, we know they've
but we painted it with a broad brush, Doctor.
Yeah.
We painted it to where everything that has to do with DEI. I can't even imagine if there is even a closeness in the resume of a person. Why would you even take a person who was a person of color or a woman? Or why would you take it over a white man when you know that there's going to be both press and litigation and all? I mean, to me, it's awful. When you know, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as a business person, I want to say, all right, well, I want to have a team that will express different points of view that will help me because that population of thought is going to end up making the team better. But how am I going to do that? And how does what I would love to know is that executives who are not white males, how do they feel in their jobs right now?
You know how they feel in their jobs right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you feel with sitting there going, how am I being looked at by my team? How am I being looked at under this rubric of anti-DEI?
That has always been with us, the whole fight against affirmative action when it finally started at the end of the late 70s. There's so many pieces to this, but when that fight started, there was never, and the same thing happened with DEI, there was never a mandate to do what employers eventually did. They did it out of, I think, a combination of laziness and caution. They wanted to protect themselves, and I can certainly see why you would want to do that if you own a business, but they didn't know enough to know what to do. And rather than checking, they sort of administered their own version of fixing this issue. And then it turned her into almost being cast in stone. So when we think of affirmative action now, we think of these people who get hired despite not being qualified for a job, or throwing some white male out of a job and putting somebody who's not qualified in. And the way I've experienced it is having thousands of students over the years sort of have that question of, why would this happen? Why would you choose somebody who's not qualified? And up to and including the Attorney General of the state, who actually had to debate on this issue. And it has become a sort of dyad. You're either a person of color who is picked up by DEI or affirmative action before that, or you're a qualified white male. Okay. I'm qualified, I'm Black, I'm female. Okay, that's just the name of that tune. But I hate what it has done, because that was such a loud bullhorn pushing back against having other people come into the workplace that did not look like the people who were already there, who had intentionally been kept out for the entire history of our country. It's taken a while to get people to understand, yeah, you can be Black and female and have a brain cell. And that sounds dramatic, but I'm writing a book on DEI, and part of what I'm using is student letters. And they have actually said that, like, I grew up not thinking that this was possible. And then there you stand, absolutely qualified, the best professor I've ever had. What a lesson for me. And I've seen the same thing come up in sessions that I do, DEI sessions that I do. So that's real. What you said about what people think about it is absolutely real. The truth is, it's also absolutely false. And this is another sort of phase of that, in the sense that there will be employers who say, I'm staying away. I want these folks because I know people's experiences are what fuel what's in their head when you ask for an idea. Okay, if you're a mother, you're going to have a different outcome in terms of your thought process about children than somebody who may not have and did not have to struggle or get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that for a particular issue, because your experience is different. This is no different. When you grow up in this country in certain, even zip codes, your experience is totally different than it would be in another zip code. There was a reason that the show was called Beverly Hills 90210. Okay, because that was real. If you grew up there, then they knew you had a certain kind of experience. You're not going to have that same experience in whatever the zip code is for Biloxi, Mississippi or something.
Yep.
When you're a business person who wants to get all of those ideas there because you are serving an entire nation or the world, that becomes an important issue. But the short circuit of that was sort of just bringing in everybody because you didn't want to take the time to see if somebody was qualified. I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to actual employers who've done that. So what becomes their shortcut to doing what the law actually asks them to do, which is just broaden yourself to see that there are other people here, entertain the idea that they could be here too. Instead of doing that, they took the quick and easy route. And then when those people did not work out, they end up saying, oh, this is a really awful situation. The law requires us to do this. And let me give you an example of what I mean. I had knee surgery, double knee surgery, probably about over 10 years ago. And when I asked to have it, Dennis, the doctor said he wouldn't do both at one time. Well, I don't have time to, do this all over again. Why would I do that? Just let me suffer through the misery one time, right? So I said, is there a law, a rule or something saying that you can't do both at the same time? He said, no. I said, well, then why is that a no? And he said, well, because what happens is when people get one done, they don't do the kind of physical therapy and stuff they need to do to make it work. So then we get blamed as orthopedic surgeons for not doing it right. And I said, okay, well, when you're the one who knows what you're doing here and you tell me this is what I need to do, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm not all those other people. I could see why they wanted to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We just won't do that wholesale. But the truth is, it wasn't because of anything they were doing. They were getting blamed for it. It was because the person wasn't doing what they were supposed to do. Did physical therapy hurt? Yeah, it did. But so what? So did knees that weren't any good, right? But at least this was going to work you toward a period when you were not going to have that same kind of pain. The same thing has happened in the workplace with employers knowing that the law required something, not being real sure what it was that was required, but just figuring they won't bother us if we have what looks like an okay situation. So let's just have an okay situation. However, we have to make that happen. And that just ended up making the stuff that was supposed to be going on not happen. And the people resent what did happen. And I don't have a problem. When I had been at the university, I was the University of Georgia's first affirmative action hire. One of the things I've come across recently is a news article was done when I had been there for 20 years about, this being the first affirmative action hire, and she's been here now for 20 years. Well, the response to that from the letters that they got about the article were like, well, is she qualified? Now, I have over 60 awards for teaching and service, okay, and was just tremendously not only awarded, but valued and respected and stuff like that. But this person asked that question, and people started to chime in. And I suspect some of them may have been my students, and they asked, like, why would you ask a dumb question like that? Because they could see the dyad. Either she's here as somebody who's qualified, but that can't be true because she's Black, or she's somebody who was affirmative action hire. So I finally stepped in, and I don't usually do that. If I write a letter and people start throwing flames, I just don't sort of stay out of it. And what I had to say, Dennis, is the same thing I'll say now about this. I'm not going to feel, and they were like, she ought to feel guilty. I said, I'm not going to feel guilty about you keeping people out of a university for over 200 years that the taxpayers pay for. And then when they decide to do the right thing, all of a sudden I'm supposed to feel guilty for helping them do the right thing. That just doesn't make sense.
No, and for doing it poorly. And for doing the right thing poorly because they didn't understand.
Well, they did the right thing the right way. They hired me.
No, I understand you, but I'm talking about the employers that were trying to figure out how to do it and not being able to understand what we're doing. Well, this is wonderful. All right, let's come back and do this again periodically. As you see things come up in the news, we're going to come back for Today in DEI with Dr. BA so that we can continue to do this, because DEI is not dead. It's not dead. We need it. It's important. And I am so grateful to know you and so grateful to have you as a guide along this journey so that we return to sanity.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for doing the work. That's such an important thing to do, to have people be informed. And that's really all you're trying to do, have people be informed.
Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time on Today in DEI with Dr. BA.